The blade pierced through his chest from behind, and Kael tasted his own blood, thick, ancient, wrong, as he crashed to his knees in the grand hall where he'd been born 2 centuries ago. The silver burned through his ribs like celestial fire, and when he looked up through the haze of agony, he saw Elder Marcellus standing above him, hand still wrapped around the hilt, face twisted not with rage, but with something far worse, righteous conviction. Wait, before the next revelation happens! If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. "You were warned," Marcellus said, his voice echoing through the marble columns of the sanctuary, the ancestral home of the Volkov clan, hidden beneath Prague's oldest cathedral. "3 times, Kael. 3 times I told you to stop feeding from the willing. 3 times you defied our most sacred law." Kael coughed, blood spattering the ancient stone floor that had witnessed 1,000 years of vampire history. Around him, the other clan members watched in silence. 30 immortals, some older than nations, all bearing witness to his destruction. He wanted to tell them they were wrong, that choosing humans who consented, who understood what they were offering, was more merciful than the alternative. But the silver was spreading through his veins like poison, and he could barely form words. "The curse of banishment," Marcellus continued, pulling the blade free with a sickening sound, "is not death. Death would be mercy. You will walk this earth, stripped of your power, feeling every hunger but unable to satisfy it, aging as humans age, until you are nothing but dust and regret." The elder's hand glowed with an ethereal light, magic older than Christianity, older than Rome, passed down through the bloodline of the first vampires. Kael felt it enter him like a winter storm, freezing everything that made him what he was. His strength evaporated, his healing stopped. The silver wound in his chest remained open, weeping. "You have until sunrise," Marcellus said, turning away as if Kael had already ceased to exist. "Leave Prague, leave Europe. If any member of Clan Volkov encounters you again, they have my permission to finish what I've started." 2 younger vampires, Dmitri and Sonia, who had once called him friend, grabbed Kael under the arms and dragged him toward the exit. He tried to speak, to protest, but his voice was gone. They deposited him in the alley behind the cathedral just as the first light of dawn touched the eastern sky. "I'm sorry," Sonia whispered, and there were genuine tears in her eyes. "He's not wrong, Kael. The law exists for a reason. We can't let humans know what we are. We can't let them choose." Then she was gone, and Kael was alone with his wound and his curse, feeling the sun's approach like a countdown to execution. Except he wouldn't die. That was the horror of it. He would burn and heal just enough to burn again, over and over, until he found shelter. He crawled. For the first time in 200 years, Kael crawled like an animal through the Prague streets, leaving a trail of blood, until he found an abandoned cellar beneath a bombed-out building. There, in the darkness, he finally let himself scream. That was 15 years ago. Now, Kael stood in the rain outside that same cathedral, wearing a second-hand coat and boots held together with duct tape, looking up at the spire that marked the entrance to everything he'd lost. His hair, once dark as midnight, was streaked with gray. His face, frozen at 30 for 2 centuries, now showed lines around the eyes and mouth. The curse had made him mortal in the cruelest way possible. He aged, but slowly, and he still craved blood with an intensity that made every day a battle against madness. He'd spent 15 years in London, working night shifts in a warehouse, living in a room the size of a closet, feeding his hunger with stolen bags from blood banks and hating himself for it. He'd thought he would never return to Prague, never willingly subject himself to the sight of the life he'd lost. But 3 days ago, he'd received a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter on paper that smelled of lavender and desperation. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, young. My name is Elena Volkov. You don't know me, but I know what happened to you. My father is dying, and before he dies, he's arranged my marriage to Viktor Krasnov. If you remember anything about clan politics, you know what that means. Viktor is twice my age and 3 times more cruel. Father says it will unite 2 great bloodlines. I say it will destroy me. I found your name in the old records, in the ledger of the Banished. They say you were cursed for showing mercy to humans, for believing we could be more than predators. I'm writing to you because I need someone who isn't afraid to defy the clan. I need someone who has nothing left to lose. I don't know if this will reach you. I don't know if you're even alive. But if you are, and if you remember what it's like to be powerless, please come back. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to help me save myself. The wedding is in 5 days. Elena. P.S. My father is Marcellus Volkar. Yes, that Marcellus. I'm the daughter of the man who cursed you. I have no right to ask for your help, but I'm asking anyway. Kale had burned the letter immediately, his hands shaking with rage and old grief. The daughter of Marcellus Volkov wanted his help. The man who had destroyed him had spawned a child, something Kale himself would never do, not now, not with his power stripped away. And that child was in trouble. His first instinct was to laugh at the cosmic irony of it. His second was to feel a dark satisfaction at the thought of Marcellus suffering. But then he'd reread the letter from memory, and one line had haunted him. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to help me save myself. Those were the words of someone who understood the difference. Someone who didn't want a hero, but an ally. Someone who, perhaps, understood what it meant to be trapped by the clan's ancient laws. So here he was, standing in the rain, watching the cathedral, knowing that stepping through those doors might be the last thing he ever did. Viktor Krasnov's name alone made his blood run cold. Even before the banishment, Kale had known to stay away from the Krasnov clan. They were the old breed, the ones who saw humans as nothing but prey, who held to traditions so brutal that even other vampires whispered about them in fear. And Marcellus was selling his daughter to them. Kale pulled his coat tighter and started walking toward the cathedral entrance. His heart, still beating thanks to the curse, hammered against his ribs. He had no plan, no power, no right to be here. But he'd been banished for believing vampires could choose to be more than monsters. And if Elena Volkov was reaching out to him, it meant she believed the same thing. That was rare enough to be worth dying for. The cathedral was empty at this hour, just after midnight. Kale moved through the nave, his footsteps echoing off the vaulted ceiling, until he reached the confessional booth in the north transept. He pulled aside the heavy curtain and found the hidden lever beneath the kneeler, just as he remembered. The floor beneath him dropped away, and he descended on a stone platform into the darkness below. The sanctuary hadn't changed. Same marble floors, same ancient columns carved with scenes from vampire history, same eternal torches burning with flames that would never die. But the faces that turned toward him as he stepped off the platform were new, younger vampires he didn't recognize, along with a few older ones who stared at him with shock and something like fear. "Kale?" Demetrius' voice came from the shadows. His old friend stepped into the light, looking exactly as he had 15 years ago, not a day older, not a hair out of place. The immortality Kale had lost. "What are you doing here? If Marcellus finds you—" "I'm here to see Elena," Kale said, his voice rougher than he remembered. 15 years of disuse had changed even that. "Tell her Kale answered her letter." Demetrius' eyes widened. "You can't be serious. Viktor Krasnov arrives tomorrow with his entourage. The wedding preparations are already underway. If you interfere—" "I'm not here to interfere," Kale said, though that was probably a lie. "I'm here because she asked. That's all." A commotion at the far end of the hall interrupted them. The crowd of vampires parted, and a young woman walked through, flanked by 2 stern-looking guards. Kale's breath caught. Elena Volkov was nothing like he'd expected. Most vampire nobility carried themselves with predatory grace, an otherworldly beauty that came from centuries of perfecting their appearance. But Elena looked human, defiantly so. She wore simple clothes, jeans, a dark sweater, boots, and her brown hair was pulled back in a careless ponytail. Her face was pretty, but not stunning, marked by intelligence rather than seduction. She couldn't have been more than 25 when she'd been turned, and something in her eyes suggested it hadn't been her choice. When she saw him, she stopped. Her eyes traveled over his worn coat, his graying hair, the visible fragility that came with the curse. For a moment, Kale was certain she would turn around and leave. Why would she trust this broken man to help her? But then she smiled, small, sad, knowing, and walked toward him. "You came," she said simply. "I didn't think you would."
"I almost didn't," Kyle admitted. "Your father destroyed my life. Why should I help his daughter?" "Because I'm not my father," Elena said, stopping a few feet away. Up close, he could see the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "And because you know what it's like to have your choices taken away. He turned me 8 months ago, against my will. I was a graduate student studying medieval history. I had a life, friends, dreams. He decided I needed to be immortal to carry on the bloodline, so he made me a monster without asking." The bitterness in her voice was familiar. Kyle had heard it in his own thoughts for 15 years. "And now he's selling you to Viktor Krasnov?" Kyle said. "An alliance marriage. Viktor's clan controls most of Eastern Europe. Father's health is failing. Even vampires can sicken when they're old enough. And he wants to secure the Volkov legacy before he dies. I'm the price of that security." She glanced around at the watching vampires, then back at Kyle. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Kyle nodded. Elena turned to one of her guards. "I'll be in the archive room. Tell my father I'm researching wedding traditions, or something equally boring." The guard looked uncertain, but Elena's tone left no room for argument. She led Kyle through a side passage, down a spiral staircase, into a vast room lined with shelves containing books and scrolls that predated the printing press. This was the clan's memory, the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 years. When the door closed behind them, Elena's composure cracked slightly. She leaned against the nearest shelf, closing her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know what it cost you to walk back in here." "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Kyle asked. "I'm not who I was, Elena. The curse took everything. I can't fight Viktor. I can't even fight a human anymore. Not really. I'm just running out the clock until this body gives out." "I know," she said, opening her eyes. "I read the records. I know what the banishment curse does. You're aging, powerless, cut off from the clan's magic. But you're also the only vampire in our entire history who was punished for showing mercy. Everyone else who was banished was exiled for murder, for breaking the covenant with other clans, for threatening exposure.
You were banished for caring about human consent. She pushed off from the shelf and walked closer to him. I don't need you to fight, Victor, she said. I need you to help me escape. I've been planning this for weeks, but I can't do it alone. The clan watches me constantly. The only time they'll lower their guard is during the wedding ceremony itself. Ancient tradition says the bride must be given a moment of private reflection before she speaks her vows. That's my window. 2 minutes, maybe 3, to get out of the sanctuary and into the city. They'll hunt you, Kale said. The entire clan, Victor's clan. There's nowhere you can hide from that many vampires. Yes, there is, Elena said, pulling a folded map from her pocket and spreading it on a nearby table. Grandmother's house. My human grandmother. My father's mother-in-law. She died 2 years ago, but the house is still in my name. My human name, the one I had before the turning. It's in a small village in the Shumava forest, 3 hours from Prague. The house has been blessed by a Catholic priest, and the foundation is built on old pagan ground. Double consecration. Vampires can't enter without invitation. Kale stared at the map, his mind racing. You want to hide in a house your clan knows about? They know the village. They don't know the specific house. Because I never told father about my grandmother. I kept that part of my life separate. Elena's voice was firm now, determined. I've already stocked the house with supplies. Blood bags, human food for you, everything we need to last several months. By then, father will be dead. The doctors give him 3 months at most.
The alliance marriage will be meaningless without him to enforce it. Victor won't see it that way, Kale said. He'll see it as an insult. He'll hunt you out of pride. Let him try, Elena said. I'll take my chances with a vengeful vampire over a forced marriage to one. At least then I'm making the choice. Kale looked at her, this young woman who'd had her humanity stripped away, who was now willing to risk everything for a chance at freedom, and saw himself 15 years ago, defiant, desperate, absolutely certain that choosing his own path was worth any price. If I help you, he said slowly, your father will know I'm involved. He'll come for me first. He's dying, Kale. He barely leaves his chambers anymore. And even if he does come for you, what more can he take? You're already cursed, already banished. She met his eyes. You have nothing left to lose, and I have everything to lose. We're the perfect team. Kale laughed, a short, bitter sound. The perfect team. A powerless exile and a runaway bride. Exactly, Elena said. And now she was smiling too, with a kind of desperate hope that was painful to witness. So, will you help me? He should say no. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at him to walk away, to disappear back into his gray London existence, to let the vampire nobility destroy themselves without him. He owed them nothing. He owed Marcellus less than nothing. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was yes. Elena's smile widened, genuine relief flooding her face. Thank you, thank you. I've been so scared I'd have to do this alone. When is the wedding? Kale asked. 4 days from now, Saturday night during the new moon. Traditional vampire ceremony. It takes hours, lots of ritual, lots of witnesses. Victor arrives tomorrow with his clan, 40 vampires, all loyal to him. She pulled out another paper, this one covered in handwritten notes. I've mapped out the ceremony schedule. The moment of private reflection happens exactly 2 hours into the ritual, right after the blood oath, but before the final vows. The guards will escort me to the Eastern prayer chamber, which is usually locked, but I've arranged for the lock to be broken. There's a passage behind the altar that leads to an old escape tunnel. It comes out in the cemetery next to the cathedral. And you need me to be waiting in the cemetery, Kale said, understanding now. With a car. I've already arranged for a rental under a false name, human documents, paid in cash. The keys will be in a lockbox at the cemetery gate." She looked at him seriously. "Once we're in that car, we don't stop until we reach the house. 3 hours of driving, and then we disappear." "What about your father? Won't he try to stop the wedding if he suspects something?" "He's too proud," Elena said. "He spent weeks negotiating this alliance. He'll never believe I'd actually run. To him, I'm just a child throwing a tantrum. He thinks I'll come around once I meet Victor, once I see the advantages of the match." "And will you?" Kale asked. "Come around?" Elena's expression hardened. "Victor Krasnov killed his last 3 wives. Everyone knows it, but no one says it out loud. They were all younger than him, all married for political alliances, and they all died under mysterious circumstances within a decade. The clan ruled them accidents, hunting mishaps, blood disease." She shook her head. "I'd rather die on my own terms than wait to be his 4th victim." The certainty in her voice decided it for Kale. This wasn't a naive girl running from an arranged marriage. This was someone fleeing for her life, and she'd done her research. "All right," he said. "I'll be in the cemetery on Saturday night, 2 hours into the ceremony. With the car running," Elena added, "because we'll only have minutes before they realize I'm gone." "With the car running," Kale agreed. Elena folded up the map and notes, tucking them back into her pockets.
"There's one more thing. Father wants to see you." Kale's blood ran cold. "What?" "He knows you're here. Of course he knows. Nothing happens in the sanctuary without him knowing. He sent word while we were talking. He wants to meet with you in his chambers." Elena's face was apologetic. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he'd find out so quickly." "He's going to kill me," Kale said flatly. "He's going to try to intimidate you into leaving, but he won't kill you. Not yet. He'll want to know why you're here first, what you want. And he's still arrogant enough to think he can control the situation." She touched his arm lightly. "You don't have to go. You could leave now, and I'd still meet you in the cemetery on Saturday." But Kale was already moving toward the door. If Marcellus wanted to see him, refusing would only make things worse. And perhaps, after 15 years, it was time to face the man who'd destroyed him. "Where are his chambers?" Kale asked. "Top level, north wing. The guards will take you." Elena caught his hand. "Kale, be careful. He's weaker than he was, but he's still an elder. He still has power." "So do I," Kale said, though they both knew it was a lie. The walk through the sanctuary to Marcellus' chambers felt like a march to execution. Vampires stopped their conversations to watch him pass, their expressions ranging from shock to contempt. Kale kept his eyes forward, his shoulders straight, refusing to show weakness, even though every step reminded him of what he'd lost. The guards outside Marcellus' chambers were young, probably turned within the last century. They looked at Kale with curiosity rather than recognition. He'd been gone long enough to become a legend rather than a memory. "The elder is expecting you," one said, pushing open the heavy wooden door. The room beyond was smaller than Kale remembered, though perhaps that was just perspective. 15 years of living in a closet-sized space had changed his sense of scale. The walls were lined with books and artifacts, the floor covered in rich carpets that muffled footsteps. And in the center, in a chair that might as well have been a throne, sat Marcellus Volkov. The elder had aged, not as drastically as Kyle, but enough to be shocking. His hair, once dark and thick, was now white. His face, frozen for 5 centuries at middle age, was now gaunt, almost skeletal. His hands, resting on the arms of his chair, trembled slightly. But his eyes, those were unchanged, sharp, cold, calculating. "Kale Stryker," Marcellus said, his voice still strong, despite the physical deterioration. "I confess I never expected to see you again. I certainly never expected you to have the audacity to return here." "Your daughter invited me," Kyle said, standing his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to run. "Yes," Elena, Marcellus' mouth twisted. My foolish, rebellious, impossibly stubborn daughter. She takes after her mother in the worst ways. Did she tell you she's been corresponding with you for weeks? Did she tell you she used clan resources to track down your location in London? Kyle kept his face neutral, though his heart raced. He hadn't known Elena had been watching him for that long. She wants you to help her escape the wedding, Marcellus continued. She thinks you, of all people, will be her savior. A banished vampire with no power, no status, no future. It would be laughable if it weren't so pathetic. Then let her go, Kyle said. If the marriage isn't important. It's crucial, Marcellus interrupted, and for the first time, genuine anger flashed in his eyes. Viktor Krasnov controls territories I can't touch. His clan has resources, connections, strength. The alliance between our families will secure the Volkov legacy for the next century. Elena's personal happiness is irrelevant compared to that. She's your daughter, Kyle said, his own anger rising. Not a chess piece. She's both, Marcellus said coldly. As all children of vampire nobility are. You never understood that, Kyle. You always thought with your heart instead of your head. That's why you failed. That's why you're standing here, aged and powerless, while I still lead this clan. He leaned forward slightly, and despite his frailty, there was still something terrifying about him. I should kill you, Marcellus said softly. The banishment terms were clear. If you return to Europe, any clan member could execute you. I would be well within my rights to end your miserable existence right now. Then do it, Kyle said, meeting his gaze. I've been dying slowly for 15 years. Quick would be a mercy. Something flickered in Marcellus's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or a grudging respect. But I won't, the elder said finally. Because you're going to do something for me first. I'm not helping you force Elena into that marriage, Kyle said immediately. I don't need your help with that, Marcellus said. The marriage will happen regardless of what you do. No, what I need is information. Someone in this clan has been working against me. Small acts of sabotage, nothing obvious. Missing documents, altered schedules, rumors spread among the younger vampires that I'm losing control. I believe it's someone close to Elena, someone who's been encouraging her rebellion. And you want me to find out who it is, Kyle said slowly. I want you to watch, Marcellus said. You're an outsider now. People will talk around you, thinking you don't matter. And Elena trusts you, which means she might reveal her accomplices. He smiled, thin and cruel. In exchange, I'll allow you to remain in Prague until after the wedding. You'll have access to the sanctuary, though not to the private chambers. You can speak with Elena, attend the public events, and when the wedding is over and she's safely married to Viktor, you'll leave and never return. That's the deal. Kyle's mind raced.
Marcellus was offering him exactly what he needed. Time in the sanctuary, access to Elena, freedom to move around. But in exchange, he'd be spying on the very person he'd promised to help escape. And if I refuse, Kale asked, then I'll have the guards drag you to the surface and stake you in the cathedral square as a warning to anyone else who thinks about defying clan law, Marcellus said pleasantly. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice at all, and they both knew it. Kale took a breath, thinking fast. He could agree, pretend to spy, and use the access to help Elena escape. Marcellus would never know until it was too late. "All right," KL said. "I'll watch, I'll listen, but I won't betray anyone who doesn't deserve it." "Your moral code is noted," Marcellus said dryly. "There's a room prepared for you in the guest wing. Basic accommodations, but better than wherever you've been living. The kitchen is stocked with blood bags. I assume you're still reduced to that, given the curse." The casual cruelty of the comment stung more than KL expected. Marcellus waved a dismissive hand. "You're dismissed. The wedding preparations begin tomorrow. Try not to embarrass yourself." KL turned and left, his hands clenched into fists. Behind him, he heard Marcellus cough, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of decay even vampires couldn't fully escape. The guest room was, as promised, a bed, a small bathroom, a window that looked out over the underground cavern that housed the sanctuary. KL sat on the bed and put his head in his hands, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. He'd agreed to spy for the man who'd cursed him, to protect the daughter who'd asked for his help. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, Elena stood there, looking anxious. "He didn't hurt you," she said, relief evident. "He gave me a room and a job," KL said. "He wants me to spy on you, find out who your accomplices are." Elena's eyes widened. "And you agreed?" "I agreed to stay until after the wedding," KL said carefully, aware that the walls might have ears. "What I actually do with that time is my business." Elena understood immediately. A small smile crossed her face. "Well then, welcome to the sanctuary, KL Stryker. I hope your stay is enlightening." She left before he could respond, but the message was clear. They were still on for the escape. Everything else was just theater. KL closed the door and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. 4 days until the wedding. 4 days to help Elena escape, to defy Marcellus one final time, to prove that even powerless and cursed, he still had something to offer. 4 days until everything went wrong. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, or what passed for morning in the timeless depths of the sanctuary, KL was awakened by another knock. This time it was Dmitri, carrying a tray with a blood bag and a sealed envelope. "Breakfast," Dmitri said, setting the tray on the small table. "And an invitation. Viktor Krasnov wants to meet you." KL sat up slowly, his body aching. The curse had left him with human vulnerabilities, including the need for actual sleep and the consequences of sleeping on an unfamiliar mattress. "Why would Viktor want to meet me?" KL asked. "Because Marcellus told him about you," Dmitri said, looking uncomfortable. "Apparently the elder thought it would be amusing to introduce his daughter's future husband to the infamous KL Stryker, the only vampire ever banished for compassion." Viktor found the story fascinating. "Fantastic," KL muttered, tearing open the blood bag and drinking deeply. It was cold, sterile, nothing like fresh blood, but it dulled the constant ache of hunger. When? This evening. Formal dinner in the Great Hall. Viktor's entire entourage will be there. Dmitri paused. "KL, be careful." "Viktor isn't like the vampires you knew. He's from the old days, before the codes of conduct, before we tried to blend with human society. He's a hunter, and he sees everything as prey." "Including Elena," KL said. "Especially Elena," Dmitri confirmed. "She's young, rebellious, and human-born. Everything he finds most amusing to break." After Dmitri left, KL opened the envelope. Inside was a formal invitation, written in elegant script. "Viktor Krasnov requests the pleasure of KL Stryker's company at dinner this evening. 8 o'clock, Great Hall.
Dress is formal. Please do not disappoint. I have heard such intriguing stories about you." The signature was a flourish of black ink that looked like it had been written with a quill pen. Kyle had nothing formal to wear. His entire wardrobe consisted of worn jeans, faded t-shirts, and the single coat he'd been wearing when he arrived. For a moment, he considered skipping the dinner entirely, but that would only draw more attention. A solution arrived an hour later in the form of Sonia, his other old friend, carrying a suit bag. "From Elena," she said, handing it over. "She said you might need this." Inside was a perfectly tailored black suit, white shirt and tie, expensive, elegant, exactly the kind of thing a vampire noble would wear. A note was pinned to the jacket. "You deserve to look like who you were, not what they made you. E." Kyle's throat tightened. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as something more than a failure, a cautionary tale. Elena's small kindness hit harder than he expected. That evening, dressed in borrowed dignity, Kyle entered the great hall to find it transformed. Long tables laden with crystal goblets filled with blood, candles that cast flickering shadows on the marble columns, and everywhere vampires. 50 or 60 of them, the combined might of Clan Volkov and Clan Krasnov, all dressed in their finest, all radiating power and immortal beauty. Kale felt like a ghost at his own funeral. At the head table sat Marcellus, looking slightly better than yesterday, but still frail. Next to him was a man who could only be Viktor Krasnov. Viktor was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair pulled back in a style that had been fashionable in the 1700s. His face was handsome in a cruel way, all sharp angles and predatory grace. He wore a blood-red jacket that probably cost more than Kale earned in a year, and when he smiled, his fangs were very white and very obvious. Next to Viktor sat Elena, and Kale's heart sank. She looked miserable. The casual clothes were gone, replaced by a formal gown in deep purple that made her look like a doll being dressed for display. Her hair was elaborately styled, her face made up with cosmetics that made her look older, more sophisticated, less herself. Viktor's hand rested possessively on her shoulder. "Ah," Viktor said, his voice carrying across the hall as Kale approached. "The famous Kale Stryker. Marcellus has told me so much about you. Come, sit near us. I want to hear your story from your own lips." Kale had no choice but to take the seat indicated, 3 places down from Viktor, close enough to be part of the conversation, but far enough to mark his inferior status. "I'm not sure there's much to tell," Kale said carefully. "I broke clan law. I was punished. It's a common story." "But the specifics are so delicious," Viktor said, leaning forward with apparent interest. "You fed from willing humans. You actually asked their permission before drinking their blood, as if they were equals rather than cattle." He laughed, and several other vampires joined in. "Tell me, did you also ask permission before you breathed their air, before you walked on their ground?" "I asked because they deserved the choice," Kale said, keeping his voice level, though rage burned in his chest. "Because consent matters, even between predator and prey." "Consent," Viktor repeated, as if tasting the word. "What a human concept. Tell me, Kyle Stryker, did the rabbit give consent to the fox? Does the deer agree to feed the wolf? No, the strong take from the weak. That's the natural order." "We're not animals," Kyle said. "We can choose to be better." "Can we?" Viktor's smile widened. "Or are you simply weak, dressed up in the language of morality?" He turned to Elena, his hand sliding from her shoulder to the back of her neck, in a gesture that made Kael's blood boil. "What do you think, my dear? Should vampires ask permission before taking what they need?" Elena's jaw tightened, but her voice was steady. "I think the truly strong don't need to take anything. They are given freely." Victor's expression darkened slightly. "A pretty sentiment. We'll see if you still hold it after a few centuries of marriage." The dinner proceeded in courses, not food, but different types of blood, each from a different source, presented in crystal goblets like fine wines. Kael drank mechanically, barely tasting anything, watching Elena throughout the meal. She sat rigid, speaking only when directly addressed, her eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. Halfway through the dinner, Victor stood and tapped his goblet for attention. "My friends," he said, his voice booming across the hall, "we are gathered here to celebrate not just a wedding, but the union of two great clans. The Volkovs have been guardians of this territory for a millennium. The Krasnovs have ruled the East for twice that long. Together, we will be unstoppable." He pulled Elena to her feet, keeping his grip on her arm tight enough that Kael could see her wince. "This beautiful creature will be my wife, my partner, my possession. She is young, yes, barely a year in the blood, but I have always enjoyed the process of education." His smile was predatory. "By the time I'm done with her, she'll understand exactly what it means to be a Krasnov." The assembled vampires applauded.
Elena stood frozen, her face a mask of composure that must have cost her everything to maintain. Kael's hands clenched under the table. "But tonight," Victor continued, "I want to toast someone else as well. Kael Stryker, stand up." Kael's stomach dropped, but he had no choice. He rose slowly, aware of every eye in the hall turning toward him. "Kael Stryker represents everything our kind must avoid," Victor said, his voice now carrying an edge of mockery. "Weakness disguised as morality. Sentimentality disguised as honor. He thought vampires should ask permission from their prey, should treat humans as equals. And where did it get him?" Victor gestured at Kael's graying hair, his weathered face. "Cursed, banished, aging toward death like the very humans he tried to save." More laughter rippled through the hall. Kael stood there, taking it, refusing to look away. "So let us toast," Victor said, raising his goblet, "to Kael Stryker, a living reminder of what happens when we forget what we are. May his example keep us strong, keep us true to our nature, keep us apex predators rather than bleeding hearts." "To Kael Stryker," the crowd echoed, their voices dripping with contempt. Kael sat down, his face burning. Across the table, Elena caught his eye, and in her gaze he saw fury and sympathy in equal measure. She mouthed two words, "I'm sorry." The dinner continued, but Kael barely registered it. He sat there, enduring the occasional barbed comment, the pitying looks, the whispered conversations about his fall from grace. This was Marcellus's revenge, he realized. Not killing him, but humiliating him in front of everyone who'd once called him friend. When the dinner finally ended, Kael escaped to his room as quickly as possible. He tore off the borrowed suit, hands shaking with rage, and was pulling on his old jeans when another knock came at the door. He opened it to find Elena, still in her purple gown, mascara smudged around her eyes from tears shed apparently been hiding all evening. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. Kael stepped aside. Elena entered, closed the door behind her, and immediately collapsed into the single chair, putting her head in her hands. "I'm sorry,"
she said, her voice muffled. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know Victor would do that. I didn't know Father would allow it." "It's not your fault," Kale said, though the words felt hollow. "This is what they do. This is who they are." "I can't marry him," Elena said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "Kale, I can't. Did you see the way he looked at me? Like I was a toy he was planning to break. He told me earlier in private that he's looking forward to training me. He described what that training would involve." She shuddered. "I'd rather die." "You won't die," Kale said firmly. "We stick to the plan. Saturday night, during the ceremony, you run. I'll be waiting." "What if it doesn't work? What if they catch me?" "Then we improvise," Kale said, "but we don't give up. You asked for my help because you wanted to save yourself, remember? Well, I'm here, and I may be powerless and cursed, but I'm also too stubborn to let Viktor Krasnov win." A small smile flickered across Elena's face. "Stubborn, that's one word for it." "It's the nicest one," Kale agreed. Elena stood up, wiping her eyes. "I should go. Victor wants to meet with me tomorrow to discuss wedding traditions, as if this is a normal marriage, as if I have any say in anything." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Kale, thank you for coming back, for standing up there tonight and taking their contempt. I know it cost you." "Everything costs me these days," Kale said. "Might as well spend it on something worthwhile." After she left, Kale lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying Victor's speech over and over. The vampire's words had been designed to hurt, and they had succeeded. But beneath the pain, Kyle felt something else stirring, the same defiant rage that had gotten him banished in the first place. Victor thought compassion was weakness. Marcellus thought mercy was failure. They were wrong. And in 3 days, Kyle was going to prove it. The next 2 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations. The sanctuary was transformed into something between a cathedral and a throne room, with blood-red banners hanging from the columns and ceremonial altars being erected in the great hall. Kyle watched it all from the margins, nominally looking for Marcellus' mysterious traitor, but actually memorizing the layout, counting the guards, noting the schedule. Elena was kept busy with fittings, rehearsals, meetings with Victor's family members. Kyle caught glimpses of her in passing, always surrounded by attendants, always looking exhausted. They had no opportunity to speak privately, but once, when she passed him in a corridor, she pressed a small piece of paper into his hand. Back in his room, Kyle unfolded it. "Cemetery gate. Lockbox code, 1847. Keep your phone on." He memorized the number and burned the paper in the candle flame. On the day before the wedding, Kyle was summoned once more to Marcellus's chambers. The elder looked worse than ever, his skin gray, his breathing labored. Whatever illness had taken hold was winning. "Well," Marcellus asked without preamble, "have you found my traitor?" "No," Kyle said, which was true. He'd been looking for Elena's escape route, not for saboteurs. "Useless," Marcellus muttered. "I should never have let you stay. You're as incompetent now as you were then." "If you're so disappointed, let me leave," Kyle suggested. "After the wedding," Marcellus said firmly, "I want you to witness it. I want you to see Elena bound to Victor, to see the alliance completed. Then you can scurry back to whatever hole you've been living in." There was something in the elder's eyes, a desperate need for control, for victory, even as his body betrayed him. Kale realized that this wedding wasn't really about politics or alliances. It was about Marcellus proving he could still command his world, still bend others to his will, even as death approached. "I'll be there," Kale said quietly. "Good." Marcellus waved a dismissive hand. "Now get out. I have actual important matters to attend to." Kale left, wondering if that would be the last time he saw the man who'd cursed him. Part of him hoped it was. Another part felt an unexpected pang of something that might have been pity. That evening, Cale made his way through the sanctuary's tunnels, following Elena's map to the cemetery exit. The passage was old, carved from stone centuries ago, and it opened into a small mausoleum on the edge of the cemetery grounds. He tested the route, timing how long it took, memorizing every turn. Then he found the lockbox at the cemetery gate, a small metal box secured to the fence with a combination lock. He entered 1847 and it opened to reveal a set of car keys and an address for a rental agency. Everything was ready. Tomorrow night, they'd run. Saturday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Cale spent the day in his room, conserving his energy, trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong. At sunset, he dressed in the black suit Elena had given him. It seemed appropriate to look his best for either a wedding or a funeral. The ceremony began at 8 o'clock. The great hall was packed with vampires, all dressed in formal attire, all radiating power and immortality. Cale took a seat in the back where he could see everything but wouldn't be noticed. Victor entered first, flanked by his clan members, looking like a conqueror about to claim his prize. He wore black and crimson with a ceremonial sword at his hip, an old vampire tradition, a symbolic reminder that marriage was once conquest by other means. Then came Elena, and Cale's breath caught. She wore white, a traditional wedding gown that seemed to glow in the candlelight, her hair elaborately braided with blood-red flowers woven through. She looked beautiful and terrified and utterly alone as she walked down the aisle between the assembled vampires. Marcellus should have walked with her, the father giving away the bride, but he was too weak. Instead, 2 attendants escorted her to the altar where Victor waited. The ceremony began in Old Romanian, a language Cale barely understood, full of words about blood and binding and eternal loyalty. A priest, a vampire old enough to have been ordained before the Reformation, led the ritual. Blood was drawn from both Victor and Elena, mixed in a golden chalice, then drunk by each in turn. The blood oath, the first binding. Cale glanced at his watch. They were 30 minutes in. He needed to leave soon to get to the cemetery. More rituals followed. The exchange of rings, the ceremonial sword passed from Victor's hand to Elena and back again, symbolic of protection and submission. Elena went through the motions mechanically, her face blank. 90 minutes. Cale stood quietly and slipped out of the hall. No one noticed. They were all focused on the ceremony, on the spectacle of 2 great clans uniting. He took the tunnel to the cemetery, emerging into cool night air. The rental car was parked where Elena's instructions had indicated, a nondescript sedan, old enough not to draw attention. Cale started it and drove it to the cemetery gate, parking as close as possible to the entrance. Then he waited, engine running, watching the clock on the dashboard. 2 hours exactly would be at 10 o'clock. He watched the minutes tick by, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. What if Elena couldn't get away? What if the guards stopped her? What if Marcellus had suspected something and changed the schedule? At 9:58, Cale's phone buzzed.
Coming. Problems. Run when I get there. Problems. That wasn't good. Cale put the car in gear, ready to move the instant he saw her. At 10:03, the cemetery gate burst open and Elena ran through, still in her wedding dress, the white fabric stained with something dark, blood. She was limping, one hand pressed to her side, and behind her, Cale could hear shouts. "Drive!" she screamed, wrenching open the passenger door and throwing herself inside. "Go! Go! Go!" Cale hit the accelerator. The car lurched forward just as 3 vampires emerged from the cemetery gate. One of them, Dmitri, reached for the car, his hand actually touching the trunk before they pulled out of range. "What happened?" Kale demanded, weaving through the narrow Prague streets as fast as he dared. Behind them, he could see figures emerging from the cathedral, more vampires, starting the chase. "Victor suspected something," Elena gasped, her face pale. "During the private reflection, he had a guard waiting in the chamber instead of leaving me alone. I had to fight my way out. I think I killed him." "You killed a vampire?" Kale asked, shocked. "I took the ceremonial sword," Elena said, pulling the blade from where it had been hidden in her dress. It was indeed stained with blood. "Staked him through the heart and didn't wait to see if it took. Kale, they're going to hunt us for this, not just for running, but for murder." "Then we don't stop," Kale said, taking a sharp turn onto the highway heading south. "We get to the house, we bar the door, and we wait them out." In the rearview mirror, he could see headlights, multiple cars, moving fast. The chase had begun. The drive to the Shumava forest should have taken 3 hours. Kale made it in 2.5, pushing the old sedan to its limits, taking back roads and shortcuts, trying to lose their pursuers. But vampires had advantages: better night vision, faster reflexes, and the ability to track by scent. Every time Kyle thought they'd lost them, the headlights would reappear in the distance. "How much farther?" Elena asked. She'd taken off her headdress and was using torn strips of her dress to bandage the wound in her side, a knife cut from the guard she'd fought. 20 minutes, Kyle said, though he wasn't sure the car would last that long. The engine was making concerning noises, and the fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should. They made it to the village, a tiny collection of houses scattered among the trees, just as the car started smoking. Kyle abandoned it on the side of the road and helped Elena out. She could barely walk now, the adrenaline wearing off, the injury taking its toll. "Which house?" Kyle asked. "End of the lane, blue shutters. There." Elena pointed with a shaking hand. Kyle half carried her down the dark lane. Behind them, in the distance, he could hear car engines, voices calling out in Romanian. The hunting party had arrived in the village. The house was small, old, built in traditional Czech style, with stone walls and a peaked roof. Elena fumbled with the keys, her hands slick with blood, and Kyle finally took them from her and unlocked the door himself. They stumbled inside, and Elena immediately began speaking in Latin, words of invitation and barrier, activating the house's protections. Kyle felt it take effect, a subtle shift in the air, a sense of boundary being established. "They can't enter now," Elena said, collapsing onto a worn sofa. "Not without invitation. We're safe." But even as she said it, there was pounding on the door. Voices outside, Victor's voice, loud and furious. "Elena, come out here right now. You've made your point. You've had your rebellion, but this ends now. Come out, and I'll be merciful. Stay inside, and I'll make you watch as I burn this entire village to the ground." Kyle looked at Elena. "He's bluffing." "He's not," Elena said weakly. "Victor doesn't bluff." "Hell, kill everyone here just to make a point." The pounding intensified. Other voices joined in, members of both clans, demanding Elena surrender, threatening violence if she didn't. Kale moved to the window and carefully pulled aside the curtain. Outside, he counted at least 20 vampires, including Victor, Dmitri, Sonia, and several others he recognized. They stood in a semicircle around the house, unable to cross the threshold, but clearly prepared to wait. And beyond them, Kale could see lights turning on in other houses as the villagers woke to the commotion. "He'll really do it," Elena whispered. "He'll slaughter them all." "Not if we give him something else to focus on," Kale said. An idea was forming. Reckless, probably suicidal, but it might work. "Elena, do you trust me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Then stay here, keep the door locked. No matter what happens, don't invite anyone inside." "What are you going to do?" Kale picked up the ceremonial sword Elena had dropped.
I'm going to have a conversation with your fiancé." Before Elena could stop him, Kale opened the door and stepped outside, pulling it shut behind him. The vampires stopped their pounding, surprised. Victor stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "Kale Stryker," he said, "of course you're involved in this. Did you really think you could steal my bride?" "She's not your bride," Kale said calmly. "She's a person with her own will, and she's chosen not to marry you. Respect that choice and leave." Victor laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "Respect from the vampire who asks permission to drink blood? You're pathetic. Step aside, let Elena come out, and I might let you live. Interfere, and I'll tear you apart slowly." "You can try," Kale said, raising the sword, "but I don't think you will, because I'm standing on consecrated ground, and you can't touch me here without invitation. So we're at an impasse." "Impasses can be broken," Victor said. He turned to one of his clan members. "Go to the nearest house. Bring me a villager. I'll kill one every hour until Elena surrenders." The vampire moved to obey, but Kale spoke loudly. "If you harm those villagers, I'll testify against you to the Council of Elders. I'll bring evidence of treaty violations, of hunting in protected territories, of breaking the First Covenant. I may be banished, but my testimony still carries weight, especially given why I was banished, for showing mercy. The council will listen to me over you." Victor hesitated. The Council of Elders was the supreme authority over all vampire clans. And breaking the First Covenant, the ancient agreement to keep vampire existence secret from human authorities, was the most serious crime a vampire could commit. "You're bluffing," Victor said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Am I?" Kale asked. "Try me. Kill a villager and see what happens. Or you could accept that Elena doesn't want this marriage, that she's exercising her right to refuse, and you could leave with your dignity intact." "She took a blood oath," Victor snarled. "She drank my blood. That oath is binding." "Under duress," Kale countered. "The oath requires willing consent. If she was forced or coerced, it's void. Elena, were you willing?" From inside the house, Elena's voice came clearly. "No, I was never willing. I was forced by my father, threatened by you, given no choice. The oath is void." Victor's face darkened. "This isn't over. I'll wait as long as it takes. Marcellus is dying. Days, maybe a week at most. When he dies, the protection this house offers will mean nothing. Clan Volkov will fall into chaos, and Clan Krasnov will be there to pick up the pieces, including you, Elena." "Then you'll be waiting a long time," Kale said, "because we're not coming out." The standoff continued through the night. The vampires couldn't enter the house, but they also wouldn't leave. They set up a perimeter, taking shifts watching the doors and windows. Inside, Kale helped Elena move to the bedroom upstairs where she could rest while he kept watch. "You should drink," Elena said, gesturing to the small refrigerator where she'd stored blood bags. "Keep your strength up." "I'm not the one who needs strength right now," Kale said, but he did take a bag, drinking it slowly while watching the vampires outside through a crack in the curtains. "Thank you," Elena said softly, "for coming out there, for facing Victor." "Someone had to," Kale said, "and I'm the only one who has nothing left to lose." "That's not true," Elena said. "You have your integrity, your principles. Those are worth more than power or immortality." Kale turned to look at her. "You really believe that?" "I do," Elena said. "You were banished for showing mercy. That makes you the best vampire I've ever met." They stayed like that through the night, taking turns sleeping and watching, waiting for the siege to end. But as dawn approached and the vampires retreated to their cars to avoid the sun, Kael knew this was just the beginning. Victor wasn't going to give up, and when Marcellus died, all bets were off. 3 days passed. The vampires maintained their vigil, switching out watchers, keeping the house surrounded. Elena's wound healed slowly, vampire healing without full vampire powers, since the protections of the house dampened supernatural abilities. Kael rationed their supplies and tried not to think about what would happen when they ran out. On the 4th day, a different vampire approached the house. Not Victor or any of the Krasnovs, but Sonya. She knocked politely on the door. "Kael? Elena? I need to speak with you. I'm not here to attack or threaten. Please." Kael and Elena exchanged glances. Finally, Elena called out, "What do you want?" "Marcellus is dead," Sonya said. "He died this morning. Before he died, he asked to speak with me. He told me things about the banishment, about you, Kael. I think you need to hear this."
Kael's heart clenched. Marcellus was dead. The man who'd cursed him, who destroyed his life, was gone. He should feel relief, or satisfaction, or something. Instead, he felt hollow. "I'm not inviting you in," Elena said firmly. "I don't expect you to," Sonya said. "But I can pass something through, a letter. Marcellus wrote it before he died. It's addressed to both of you." After a tense discussion, they agreed to accept the letter through a crack in the door, using tongs to avoid any physical contact that might break the barrier. The envelope was sealed with wax, bearing Marcellus's personal seal. Kael opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 3 pages covered in elegant, trembling handwriting. "Kael and Elena, if you are reading this, I am dead. Good. I have lived too long and done too much harm. Kael, I need you to know the truth about your banishment. The official reason, feeding from willing humans, was real, but it was also an excuse. The truth is that you terrified me. You represented a future I couldn't control, where vampires chose mercy over power, where we evolved beyond predators. I saw in you everything I'd spent centuries suppressing in myself. My wife, Elena's mother, was human when I met her. I loved her, truly loved her, though I tried to deny it. When I turned her to save her from illness, I thought I was giving her a gift. Instead, I destroyed what I loved most about her. She became like me, cold, calculating, predatorial. She died hating what she'd become. I banished you because you reminded me of what I'd lost. You showed that vampires could be more, and I couldn't bear to see it. I was wrong. The curse I placed on you was my greatest sin. Elena, you are so much like your mother, stubborn, principled, unwilling to compromise who you are. I thought forcing you into immortality and then into marriage would protect you, would give you the tools to survive in our world.
Instead, I was making the same mistake I made with your mother. I was destroying the very thing that makes you exceptional. I cannot undo what I've done, but I can give you this. My death voids the blood oath between Victor and Elena. Without my living will to enforce it, the marriage contract is null. Victor has no claim. And Kael, in my final hours, I had our clan's witch examine the curse. She says it can be broken, but only through an act of genuine sacrifice. What that means, I don't know. Perhaps you'll figure it out. Perhaps not. But you deserve the chance to try. I'm sorry. Those are inadequate words for the damage I've caused, but they're all I have. Elena, be better than I was. Kael, keep showing the mercy. The world needs it. Marcellus Volkov. Cale read the letter 3 times, hardly believing the words. Marcellus had admitted fault, had apologized, had tried in his final moments to make amends. Elena was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. He never told me about my mother, never told me she'd been human. He just kept it all buried, he was said softly, ashamed of loving her, ashamed of destroying her. So he tried to control everything else instead. Outside, Sonia called through the door. "The blood oath is void. Victor knows this. He's very angry. Be careful." Her footsteps retreated, and Cale and Elena were left alone with the letter and its revelations. "What does it mean? An act of genuine sacrifice?" Elena asked. "I don't know," Cale admitted. "But right now, we have a more immediate problem. If the blood oath is void, Victor has no legal claim on you. But he's not going to accept that. He'll still want revenge." As if summoned by his words, there was a tremendous crash downstairs. Cale rushed to the window and saw Victor at the head of a group of vampires, carrying a battering ram. They were attacking the door despite the protections.
"They can't get in," Elena said, but she sounded uncertain. "They shouldn't be able to," Kyle corrected. "But Victor's old, powerful. If he's willing to risk the consequences of breaking consecrated barriers—" Another crash. The door shuddered but held. "We need a plan," Elena said. Kyle thought frantically. They had the ceremonial sword, a house full of supplies, and protections that might or might not hold, against 20 vampires led by one of the oldest, most vicious creatures in Europe.